Hey there, Heather Boyd here. Welcome to day 4 of the 10-day acrylic painting challenge. I will be posting tutorials every second day so that you have lots of time to catch up with the challenges. There really are no rules and no deadlines in this challenge. It's just for fun. I would love to see pictures of your creations. You can email photos to heatherboydwire@gmail.com, or you can join my private Facebook group, Heather Boyd Art. The group is open to all subscribers of this channel. You can share photos of your creations from the 10-day acrylic painting challenge and any other of your mixed media artwork.
Today we're using watercolor techniques to create an under-the-sea acrylic painting. You will need your acrylic paints, a canvas or watercolor paper. You're going to need rubbing alcohol, saran wrap, and coarse salt, and also paper towel and your water. We are going to start one on watercolor paper, and I'm going in with the paint. I'm adding quite a bit of water, and we are going to paint a kind of watery background. So we're going to go in with some blues, and we're going to drag the paint across the paper with a larger brush. We have to work quite quickly with this as the acrylic will dry pretty fast, and the acrylic does stain the paper, so you won't have the same ability to erase color with water. And we're just going to go in quickly, add a little bit of yellow for vibrancy, adding water to our paint as we go. And then I want to use the alcohol technique, so I'm putting down drops of rubbing alcohol, and that's going to create bubbles in the water. I will link up some watercolor tutorials that will show you this technique as well. Now I'm going to go in much quicker. I'm putting the video in fast speed at some points so that we can just get through the project quickly. Always feel free to slow down the playback speed of my videos so you can get a better look at what we're doing. So now we want to do the sea bed. I'm going in with some yellow ochre and some burnt umbers, some kind of more earthy colors. You can add in some reds, some greens, and we're just literally blobbing down the color. And again, you want to make sure it's pretty watery to be able to get the effect, and we're going to right away drop down some coarse salt, and that's going to create some textures. You're going to leave the salt there because it has to dry before we remove it. And we want to keep going with the seabed. I'm adding down some yellows, some browns, some ochres, and like I said, you just blob down the paint. They're going to bleed together. You want that fine balance of enough water but not too much water, and you want to keep it wet so the techniques will work. So we are working quickly, and now we have our saran wrap ready, and we're going to squeeze it down. So we're just going to lay it down, kind of squish it in a little bit, and it'll go kind of crinkly. And again, we want to leave it there because that will create some textures. And all of these techniques are in some other videos that will be linked up below. And you can see more clearly how things are done. Works really well with watercolor, but it also works pretty well with acrylic. So now we're going to keep going with the seabed, adding some greens, ochres, browns, and just dabbing our brush around to get different areas of color. We don't want to blend them all together, and we're not blending on our palette. We're just plopping down those colors on the paper itself, and they will naturally do their thing and blend together in a way that's very magical. And you want some nice contrasts of dark and light, so we'll go in with some browns, burnt umbers to have some nice contrast. And it's not going to look like much when you still have your salt and your saran wrap, but you will see once we remove that, it's going to look really cool. So we're going to grab some more paint, and now we are going to do some seaweed. So I'm going with a longer brush, and the paint is quite diluted. You can have some darker seaweed and lighter seaweed to give an impression of depth in the seabed. And we're just going to pull up those seaweeds randomly. They don't have to be even, and it's good to kind of wiggle your brush so they have movement to them. They look like they're flowing in the ocean. You could pull down the saran wrap a little bit to access. Make sure you've got all the white of the paper covered. You can do that by adding a little bit of paint, a little bit of water, and just blend it as you wish. This is a super fun project. And then once it's dry, you can remove the saran wrap, and then to remove the salt, just dab it with a little paper towel. But make sure it's 100% dry before you do this. So here's the sample on watercolor paper, and now we're going to do one on a canvas. So I'm using canvas board, and I'm using the same techniques where we're just taking the pure acrylic color and adding water, and then we're going to blend it on our surface. So we're getting a pretty wide brush. For this part, we are going to add water to our blues now, and just super quickly just plop it on the canvas. Keep in mind this is done in fast speed, so you can slow down the video if you want to see it done at a slower speed. But basically we're adding a little water, well, quite a bit of water to the paints, and just blending them on the background. And you do have to work quick for these techniques to work. You might want to practice a bit before you go on your canvas. You could get some little practice canvas sizes, and we're just going to go in, make sure that the paint is wet using the largest brush. And then we're going to get our alcohol and just pop on our blobs of alcohol, and you'll see those magically create the bubbles in the water. It's a super fun technique. So put the alcohol at the side, and now we need to do the ocean floor. So we're going to get some yellow ochre, add quite a bit of water. You really need to add quite a bit of water for these, depending on what kind of acrylics you're using. The dollar store acrylics are quite watery, but still, even at that, you'll have to add quite a bit of water. So here's the blob technique. We're just going to grab those colors, mix with water, and blob them right down. We're not mixing on our palette. We're just blobbing them down randomly, kind of around. You can have more concentration of colors in certain areas. It's very intuitive. Just go with what you think looks good. And you do want some contrast of light and dark, so we will be adding some burnt umbers, some brown, to make sure it's nice and contrasty. And again, making sure you have enough water in your paints that they almost resemble watercolors. Not quite as thin as watercolors. So now we're going to just squish on our saran wrap. Have the saran wrap ready so it's easy to grab and squish, and just kind of tweak with your thumb and finger. Just pull in so it looks kind of crinkly, like crunching up a piece of paper. So now we've got that part done, and we want to do some seaweed. So with our longer brush, quite a bit of water in the greens. Use more than one color of green. It just looks more interesting. If you only have one green, mix your own greens. Add some yellow, add some blues, darken them up. And we're just going to pull the seaweed from the base of the ocean up. So once it's dry, we will remove that saran wrap, and it already looks pretty cool. and you can go in and touch up any areas that you like. If there's some white showing from the canvas, you can go in with some watery paint. Just as a good time to do some little touch-ups. And if you want to darken it up, I'm just going in with some umber and darkening it up a little bit, using a thin brush just to add in some little details, just to make some of the transitions a little smoother. And then now I'm going to do a fish. So you can draw it out first. You can draw it on a paper and transfer it. You can collage a fish on there. I've done many things. I used to teach art to kids, and one of the projects is we did this type of technique, and the fish was actually a collage. So you could paint it separately on a separate paper, cut it out and glue it on. If you make a mistake, you can do that. Acrylic's great because you can layer it up. So say you draw your fish and you paint it and you don't like the colors, you could just let it dry and paint on top. So that's a fun thing about acrylic. But the main thing is, if you are, if you've made a mistake and you do want to fix it, just let it dry and then go over it after. Sometimes when we try to overwork things, they just get really muddy. So now we're just going in with a small brush and we're adding some oranges. You see, I kind of jump from one area to another. Brighten it up a little bit more with pure orange. The fins are like basically very watery white for now. Now I'm going to darken it up underneath and above. Just give it a bit of three-dimensionality. You can use the tip of the brush or the side of the brush. Now I'm doing the eye, so I'm just going to block out the eye with some white. You see I jumped and it's more filled in now, the fish. Took me a while to paint, so you can take your time with it. Just adding some shadow underneath. And I'm going to define the fins a little bit. Just go in with a fine brush and some darker color to create some lines. Oh, do a little dot for the eye. Looks a little stark, but we're going to tone it down a little bit. Do a little shadow around it, gives it a little bit of depth. And then I went in to do some texture with a bit of kind of yellow ochre. So if you want to give it the impression of having scales, you can go in with a brush and just blob on some textures. Super fun, super easy. And then I toned that down a little bit too. So dry it between layers. Like I did the dots, I let it dry, and then now I'm going in with more of a dry brush to do some highlights. And there is the finished underwater fish scene.
So thanks so much for watching the video. Thank you to everybody who is participating in the 10-day acrylic painting challenge, and we'll see you the next time.